In the infinite chronicles of Sherlock Holmes, many cases are born of modern malice, but some are unearthed from the dust of centuries. This is the account of a family secret, an ancient riddle. The Musgrave Ritual. It began with Reginald Musgrave, an old college acquaintance of Sherlock. Musgrave was the heir to Hurlston, one of the oldest estates in western Sussex. He came to Holmes because of a series of unexplainable disappearances. At this point, Holmes had graduated from college and had started practicing as a private detective. The first person to go missing was the house butler, Richard Brunton. A week ago, one night, Musgrave was finding it difficult to sleep, so he decided to read a book that he had been reading earlier that day. He remembered keeping it in the library, so he decided to go there and fetch it. But once he approached the library, he saw a light coming from inside. Thinking that it might be a burglar, Musgrave became alert. He gathered all his courage and slowly opened the door. Inside the room was the butler, Brunton. He was examining a copy of the Musgrave Ritual, a family document that had been passed down through generations. The Musgrave Ritual was a set of questions and answers that each Musgrave had to go through once they come of age. Even though every Musgrave had to go through this ceremony, it was considered to be of no importance. Reginald confronted Brunton then and there and ordered him to leave the services of the household at once. But fearing the disgrace, Brunton requested Reginald for a notice period of 1 month. Considering the long service that Brunton had provided to his family, Reginald allowed a notice period, but for only 1 week. But from the third morning onwards from that day, Brunton had gone missing. Reginald first thought that he might have left, but once he inspected his room, it was evident that that was not the case. His bags and clothes were still in there, even his boots were there, but his slippers were missing. He had gone out somewhere that night and has not been seen since then. The second person to go missing was the housemaid, Rachel Howells. She was also Brunton's ex-girlfriend. She had fallen ill a few days before Brunton went missing. And from the day he went missing, her illness got worse and she started to become delusional. And 2 days ago, she had also gone missing. The search party were able to trace her footsteps till the edge of the lake nearby. They searched the whole lake for her body, but no remains could be found. But they were able to retrieve a linen bag from the lake. The bag was filled with pebbles and a rusted piece of metal. The local police were informed, but their investigation came up empty-handed. Musgrave had come to Sherlock as a means of last resort. Sherlock asked to see the copy of the Musgrave Ritual that Brunton had been examining. Even though Musgrave thought that it had no importance, he did bring a copy of the same. Sherlock read the document, word by word. Whose was it? His who is gone. Who shall have it? He who will come. What was the month? The 6th from the 1st. Where was the sun? Over the oak. Where was the shadow? Under the elm. How was it stepped? North by 10 and by 10, east by 5 and by 5, south by 2 and by 2, west by 1 and by 1, and so under. What shall we give for it? All that is ours. Why should we give it? For the sake of the trust. Sherlock felt that the ritual had a hidden meaning, one that the Musgraves had ignored, but somehow Brunton understood. He joined Musgrave on his way back to the Hurlstone estate. On reaching there, he once again took a look at the Musgrave ritual. He marked the words oak and elm. He knew that the two should be real-world landmarks in the Hurlstone estate, and he did remember seeing a great oak tree in front of the house. He asked Musgrave whether he knew the height of the oak tree. Musgrave thought for a moment, and then he remembered that the height of all the trees in the estate were measured 15 years ago, and the record for the same is kept in the library. They took the record. The height of the oak tree was 23 feet. Holmes then asked Musgrave whether there are any elms in front of the house. Musgrave told that there used to be an elm between the oak and the house, which was cut down almost 10 years ago. Sherlock checked the height of the same in the record. It was 64 feet. He then looked at the ritual again and marked the word shadow and the phrase over the oak. He now realized that once the sun is just over the oak, the shadow cast by the farther end of the elm will be their next checkpoint. But the elm was no longer there to cast the shadow. Holmes then remembered the scaling principle. He took a rod of 6 feet and placed it just where the elm was. And once the sun reached just above the oak, he measured the length of the shadow cast by the rod. It was 9 feet. So if a rod of 6 feet casts a shadow of 9 feet, then a tree of 64 feet should cast a shadow of 96 feet. He then marked the exact point, which was 96 feet from the rod, in the direction of the shadow cast by it. This was their next checkpoint. He also saw that someone had already marked the same spot with a stick. Sherlock then walked as per the directions given in the ritual. North by 10 and by 10, east by 5 and by 5, south by 2 and by 2, west by 1 and by 1. He reached a point which was much farther from the house, but there was nothing there. He checked the ritual again. He saw the phrase "and under." He first thought that the place might have to be dug, but then Musgrave remarked that the cellar of the house was right under the spot that they were standing. It was the cellar where the wood for the house was kept. Holmes now knew it. They had to head to the cellar at once. Once they reached it, it was evident that they were not the first people to reach there recently. Someone had already removed some of the wood from their place, and a pathway had been created. At the end of the pathway was a flagstone. Holmes noticed that a jacket was lying next to the flagstone. Musgrave remarked that it belonged to Brunton. Holmes then asked Musgrave to call the police and told him that their presence is crucial before they proceed any further. Once the police arrived, Holmes started to move the flagstone. Beneath it was a hole. They pushed down a lantern and it lit up a small chamber. They went down into the chamber only to find an empty box. A few metal coins lay scattered near it, and a bit farther away lay Brunton's lifeless body. The police examined his body. There were no wounds or bruises on it. The police and even Holmes had no idea what could have happened. Why didn't Brunton leave the chamber once he found the box? And anyway, the box was empty. Holmes now realized that Brunton had an accomplice. He then asked to see the bag that was retrieved from the lake. He examined the rusted piece of metal that was inside it. It was circular in shape. He examined it closer, and then it clicked, and everything started to make sense. He started to explain his conclusion. Rachel Howells was the one who accompanied Brunton. Brunton entered the chamber alone, while Rachel waited outside. Once Brunton handed over the content that was inside the box, Rachel pushed him into the chamber and closed the entrance. Brunton later passed away out of suffocation, and the piece of metal that was inside the bag was a crown, possibly of the late King Charles I, and the coins that were inside the chamber also belonged to that era. Holmes had learned that Musgrave's ancestor, Sir Ralph Musgrave, was the right-hand man to the then King Charles I, and the king might have handed him over the crown once he went into exile. The king was of course executed later on, and the crown remained with the Musgraves. Reginald now understood everything, and Holmes left for London later that day. But what happened of Rachel, no one knows, and no one had seen her since then.